I may pick up this camera and point it at the screen sometime during this evening, but I'm not sure. It tends to disrupt the camera. If I move it and point it at a screen, it freaks out for a bit, but I kind of want to see, like, I'll see if this freaks out the computer either, because what I want to try to do here is open up LMMS and see what it looks like. Is the mic too far away? I don't know. We'll find out. I got to be better and slightly more conscious of some of this stuff. All right. Come on. Working on LMMS starting up. It may cause a lag as the processor on the computer tries to do both live stream and start this program up. It's certainly taking its time. All right, so I think we're still running, hopefully. Yeah. Yep, seems right. All right, so LMMS. Have a look-see here. Let's see if I can get this pointed in the right direction, shall we? And still be able to use the keyboard. That'd be nice. Oh, did it freeze? It's certainly not behaving nicely. I'll give it that. All right, well, close enough, I guess. Can't tell which angle is better. It should be straight on, but it's not. All right, so what we've got here is your mixer. So we've got this is where you do the beat, see the mixing. So you can independently control the volume of different channels. Okay, so let's add, still trying to learn some of this better. Yeah, all right, so where's my piano roll? This might just freak it out. Okay, so can we add a new one? So let's, and no, that's a play, that's stop. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I always forget where this is. Come on, can we add one? Show hide beat bass. Show hide piano roll. Yeah, that is what we want to do. I don't know if that's going to be particularly helpful. It won't let me play anything on it because I have to load something into it. Please open a pattern by double-clicking on it. So can we add one here? Like, this is the part that I'm... Edit. Undo, redo. No. Tools. Project. Can we add... New? Open, recently open, save, import, export. Nope. I don't think any of that's what we're looking for. No, I don't want to rename it. Come on. Please stop being a dork about it. Clone this track. There we go. So can we double click that? No, I don't want to rename it. He's such a dork. It depends on where you click on it. That behaves like a pain in the butt. Okay, so... Okay, come on, dude. You can do something for me. Anything here. Nope, I don't want to fine. Well, rename it. Okay, so are we nothing? Okay. You're not going to give me anything to work with. It's not useful either. We cloned a track, remove this track. Yeah, you're not doing anything viable or useful as far as I'm concerned here. Yeah, I can't get it to cooperate. I mean, I've been able to play with stuff over on this side here. So what do we got here? Instrument plugins. And that opens up a list of menus of stuff I can play with. So what do we got here? Okay, yeah. It's starting to drive me crazy. So we've got a few demo stuff, demo files in here. Come on, just open one thing. Discard. So this is going to open up a sample file that we can use to demonstrate something here. So what you've got here is, this is clearly not showing us any, there we go. So what we've got here is the piano roll for it. And each one of these is a sample of an instrument. So this is an instrument here. This is where you have little pieces of it playing, and these are the notes that you can see inside each one of what's playing. I'm not to the point where I can figure out how to get this software to let me create one of those tracks yet. Of all the things that I'm trying to do with this, that should be the easiest to do. But it's not going as easily as I would prefer. So it's a little bit like fighting with it. Well, if you still have the sickness going on, you might have a deep husky voice with your vocal fray from having a cold. So you might want to capture a couple of your statements on your cold voice. Yeah. I don't know about Cubase. But I mean, as I have a couple of YouTube videos up of people who have used LMMS doing some tutorials about how to add instruments and how to the basics of. I think I have a Wikipedia page that tells you the basics of how to use LMMS, and I just haven't really sat down and reviewed it yet. I've been looking at sort of like, how do I want to structure songs? And honestly, what I'll probably end up doing for this channel is a simple, maybe like a split chord or a arpeggio style chord sequence of the 4 pop culture most known notes in the chord progression or chord progressions. So like Axis of Awesome uses like the 4 chord. They have a song called The 4 Chords of Awesome, and it's the same 4 chords, but they're using it as the base over which to be able to sing something like 40 to 70 different songs, depending on which version you're listening to. So it can give you the sense of each of those songs. It's basically the background for it. And the melody of the lyrics you're singing are the part that varies between songs. But if you frame them right, you can segue from one song into another song pretty cleanly, because they're all going to have that same background music. And I feel like if I can just take the background music and make a version of that, I can use it as the background music for my channel. And then like the jingle for the basic part of the, like the opening, the 10-second jingle or whatever I do, that one can be the melody over the background tone. And if I do something like that, very basic, so if I do like a split tone, which is one note and then two notes out of the chord, you rock back and forth, and then you jump to the next chord in the chord progression, and you do that there too, and then you do that to the next song, like a split chord. And then an arpeggio is, if it's a 3-note chord, it's 1, 2, 3 note, 1, 2, 3 note, in time with the rhythm of the music. I feel like I could possibly pull something like that for the Roving Jack channel, although I keep stumbling over the fact that I'm trying to also make it so that I can expand it later into a full song. The song itself has an origin to it, so I've sort of tried to, I've made that more complicated than it needs to be. Surprise, surprise. But I mean, I can probably see if I can get a sense for what the notes are for the Irish folk music version of Roving Jack. Like there's an opener. It's an opening ditty on a guitar, I believe. And then a regular background song for chunks of it. The song is, as times is the case, a story song. And so you get an installment of it, and then the installment, each section of it that you look into, has a lead in and a segue into the chorus, and then a lead out of the chorus back into the song. And so, like, I feel like I think that's the pattern they pretty much always do. I have to go back and look again. I feel like the pattern has always been, for that one, it's like a 4-bar, then chorus, then 4-bar, then chorus. I think that's pretty much the way they stick to it. Unless there oftentimes in modern music, you get a verse, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, verse, or something to that equivalent. And the only reason that becomes important is if I'm taking verse and switching to chorus, and then back to verse, and then back to chorus. There's not an easy mechanism at the end of the verse to connect to another verse. It's not as modular. It pretty much requires at that point that if you have verse, you have to go to chorus. And so I'm not sure what the structure of the original folk song is. I'm not that good at breaking songs down yet. But I want to see if I can take the basics of the background of that song and make a background music from it, and then have the opening jingle be the key portion of the chorus, because the chorus I think is like a 4-bar chorus or a 4-section chorus, like I will only need about half of that, 1 to 2 sections out of it. I just need let's see, the main chorus is, I'm a roving jack of many a trade of every trade, and if you wish to know my name, they call me Jack of all trades. That's the part I need. I'm trying to remember structure-wise, if there's more to it than that, or if they repeat that section. So I need to trim it to fit right, but I also need to make it fit into a greater whole that I can use as background music. And now the traditional way of doing it is there's always a line being sung. There's not really much of a just instrumental portion of it. The vast majority of what I'm going to be using is going to be instrumental for background music. It's not going to have me singing over the whole thing. So what I got to try to figure out for that is what are the notes and the rhythm and the playing style of the main theme of the piece. And I want to tweak it a little bit because it is Irish folk music, and having a little guitar music in the background isn't a detractor or anything like that. But I feel like Irish folk music is a little dated, and I would like to see if I could get a little more modern feel to it, maybe like an electronic. I don't know. It will depend on when I get it figured out, seeing if I can get it plugged in, and then seeing how it sounds in different ways. Because like we were talking about the PVC pipe musical instrument, I think that would be a fun way to potentially do it, because it has that little boom kind of sound to it. And if you play the notes of the song using that, and with a little bit of a simple back rhythm with a drum or something, I think that would probably work all right. I don't know how it would sound as background for the jingle. I keep calling it a jingle, but it's really just going to be the intro music. And so the singing of that, I kind of want to hire somebody else to do that because I don't think my voice is up for that kind of singing. I'm not that good. I haven't done a lot of singing in probably 15, 20 years, since grade school. So I was actually in band and chorus, and I did learn to do some chorus singing, and I did all right. And I had a teacher who was kind of impressed with my improvement as I went, but then I just dropped it, and I'm decades out of practice at this point. So yeah, I don't know that that's the right voice frame to step into this on. But I'll see what I can do. I do want to play around with. I might see if I can do an equivalent of that PVC pipe organ. Or I guess it's not a pipe organ. It's a pipe xylophone. But if I can get a version of that to be the guitar strumming tone, I think using something like a didgeridoo tone for the bass, which should be just a single solid note for each of the bars, and then have a more dance beat for the drums, and maybe like not a castanet, but something like a rattle for the high rhythm noises. I could get something a little more energetic, I think is what I'm going for. But again, it also comes down to like, what's the effect I want to have during a video that I'm making. And overall, I don't want it to be frantic and like a lot of club music where you have like EDC and is it EDC that I'm trying to refer to? Is that Everyday Carry? Yeah, Electric Dance Club, I think, is electronic dance club music is EDC too. And that's much more frantic and not I don't think, conducive to the background of the videos I'm making, unless I'm doing like high-speed power vehicles launching rockets from the sides of them kind of stuff. I'm not doing any of that right now. So I'm it is an interesting piece of software. I do remember playing with the pre-installed demo music when I first got it, and I've been playing a little bit more, trying to discover just how to add some of my sample sounds into it, because I think that would be immensely fun. Instead of doing like a traditional rattle, if I can take some of that rattling metal noise that I got the other day playing around on the countertops with the bucket of nails that I had, I can take some of those noises and use them, change the pitch, change the speed, and use them as the rattle noise. And I finally did get the sound off of this chair for the squeaky door sound. And if I pitch that way down, I'm wondering if I could get a tone that I could use in place of like a didgeridoo or something like that. I don't know. I might end up having to do like dragging a chair across a floor and getting that noise that chairs sometimes make, just sort of ripping up sounds of ambient things around the space. Or, ooh, I hadn't thought about that. If I take a piece of wood and I take a handsaw, and if you put the piece of wood far enough off the edge of the piece you're working on, or the bench that you're working on, and you saw, your tone's going to change depending on how much of a vibration surface you have to work with. So if I can get a nice low tone off of that, and then use that low tone, tweak it even more, and drop it even further down, I might be able to get that slow down on the tooth pattern going over the wood, gets you that raspy sound. If you break up each one of those little jags in the sound into a longer pass, you can get the vibration, and you might be able to pitch it so that you can get like a didgeridoo sound. Maybe. So like a didge sound, a PVC xylophone sound, and the rattling of metal pieces, and that small explosion for my bass piece. So the one I was making my, boom sound from, turning that into the bass beat that we did last night was one of the, I could use that for the bass beat. And so that could be all my background music components. So I'm trying to figure out like how to sample them right and how to tweak them to get the musical tones that I'm trying to get from them, after which I can then rip them up and play with them in LMMS, I believe. I'm pretty sure I can transfer in sample sounds that I've made into LMMS to be the instrument sounds. And with that, I can use the piano roll to, I don't need to use like a MIDI keyboard or anything like that to enter notes and play them at different pitches. I can literally just take the mouse and go like, I want this note here, this note here, this note here, stretch it, shrink it, shape it any way I want to, stretch it extra long, give it a little warble if I want to play with it that way, and then just kind of play and tweak it on a small scale to get exactly what I'm looking for. And I think that's where I'm going to be best starting, because like I just need to get a sense of where the sounds can produce the notes and the chords in the right sequence for the goal I'm reaching. And then I'm going to see if I can play with learning to play those on a keyboard. Yes, I did see something about that. I haven't played with that yet. I know there's a whole menu I haven't dabbled with yet. It's the generated menu, and I had seen that even before you had mentioned that. And it's one of those, like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't want something generating a sound for me, and I don't want to download somebody else's samples. Like, there's a part of me is like, I want to see if I can do this completely from scratch. And again, it's probably me making it harder on myself than it needs to be, but I did want to kind of take a look at what you were talking about. So tinkering with Audacity. And this time it won't freeze up my computer because I'm using the laptop instead of that. That should be what I do anyway. But okay, so what do we have here? Open up a file of my import. Now open. Desktop. Where's the one with all the jumbly letters because I didn't rename it? There we go. Open that one. Yes. Okay, so what do we got? So generate chirp, noise, silence, tone, pluck, rhythm, track. So add or remove plugin. So you must have got a plugin for Explosion, right? DTMF tones. So what do we got? Okay, I'm not sure I'm getting anything off of that. Amplitude, Audacity. I'm not understanding that. All right. So generate. What else we got? Chirp. I must be doing something wrong because I'm not getting these to do what I needed to. Go to update, check. Takes you to say with plugin options. Yeah, and that's, I feel like a lot of that is somebody else's samples that they've loaded into Audacity, and I'd be curious to see if I could figure out how to make my own plugins for Audacity. I'm curious about how that process is handled, because I really do want to tweak and play with all the sounds that that I can accumulate on my own in my own environment and see what I can do with them. Because it'll be handy for making music with weird sounds, which is one of the things I want to do. But it'll also be handy for when it comes to time to do like my Star Wars reimagined videos. I want to be able to create all the sound effects using things that I've captured from my environment and tweak them in Audacity and maybe even LMMS to get rhythmic sequences of sound. And so I'm still kind of learning some of this stuff. So I may end up checking some of that out in the future. One of the so add, remove plugins. What else we got? Vocal remover, Wawa, RMS. Cancel. So yeah, it looks like a separate file. I think, you know, there is that group of people that were meeting at the Rhode Island Makerspace that had synthesizers, synth systems that and their whole like board panels that you can connect with wires in multiple ways and get different tweaks and torques to the different sounds that you have. And I was looking at it, I was like, that could be fun to play with. I don't have a need for that level of tech right now. It looks like it's probably also super expensive to do. And I think a lot of the God, My brain's just not in it tonight. I think a lot of the plugins for the things like Audacity are variants on some of those pieces of equipment and what they do. They're things that warp and affect sounds, and some of them create a tone, just like a single like electric tone of some kind, and how that tweaks it. I mean, that's something I could play with eventually at a certain point, but I don't think I'm there yet. I want to, and I know as I start, it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to start out with very simple things. Simple, 4-chord progression, 3-note chords, a bass beat, potentially a high note in there somewhere, sung melody, and a basic rhythm additional file. And that's already complicated enough for me to try to learn from scratch, so it'll take me a little while to adjust to it. But I feel like if I can get some very simple, like especially, my area of interest in music to listen to most of the time is I do listen to some electronic music. I've listened to some dubstep. I've listened to some, I grew up in the 90s. I listened to a fair amount of rock and grunge. Grew up in a family that was very into Motown and some of the music from the 60s, 50s, and 60s mostly. And I got into band and chorus when I was young enough. I got a small amount of passion for classical music. So like Tchaikovsky and Mozart. And so I kind of have a love for each of those, but when push comes to shove, what you'll most likely find me listening to is Irish folk music. And there's a simplicity to it. Oftentimes it's something meant to be played with a guitar, a fiddle, and some stomping and some singing. And with that simple array of instruments, you can produce happy songs or somber songs or, a battle hymn kind of song. And you can pull off a lot with that simple set of arrangements. And the patterns in the music, like trying to remember, I think it was Metallica did a cover of Whiskey in the Jar, and it translates well from folk music style song to a rock, a metal song. And so I feel like there is enough versatility in that to be able to get different versions of it, and being able to play with it across those spectrums, to be able to reproduce a piano, a piano solo, to guitar and fiddle, to rock music version of things, and then even push the edge of rock at a different beat and a different tempo, and I could probably pull it up into the dubstep range at a certain point. And like being able to take the same song, make it really feel like it's the same family of song, but give it in different styles, I think would give me a lot of practice and experience with understanding and creating new music. That I think that's the way I need to learn it. Like, there are other ways to learn music, and there may be ways that are better for other people. I think for me, taking a type of music or a type of song that I'm used to listening to and just trying to reproduce it, then ripping it apart and recombining it in new ways, I think is the best way for me. That just seems to be the way I will learn best. It's how I've, learned a little bit of different languages. It's how I've learned a little bit of different skills and techniques for different projects. It's how I've learned art. It's, taking what was it, the Chinese or the Japanese sumei ink painting style, and instead using charcoal to do it for the painting that we did a couple months ago. That's sort of how my brain works with something. Is like understand the form and components of a thing, take it apart, reproduce them, and then put them together in new and novel ways. That's sort of the way my brain works. And I think the possibility of understanding the sounds that I'm working with, like I know the jingling nails are a sound that sounds like jingling. Can that jingling be used for music? And trying to do that to find out whether or not it's too dissonant, whether or not there are too many different sounds from different nails or objects inside of it that don't produce a harmonious sound, and it therefore isn't usable in music. I kind of want to find that out by dabbling with it. If I can take that sound and tweak the pitch and make it hit the right spot, then maybe I need to do that. And then, looking at the idea of, can I take a piece of 2x4 and a handsaw, and depending on how far off the edge of the table that I'm holding it on that I saw, does that change the sound of the piece of, does it change the sound of the sawing? So can I get a sound effect of sawing, hammering, or other tinkering sounds? But if I take that sawing sound, does it have to be sawing at C in order to be able to get varying tones on it? If it's not completely lined up with a certain note, does it interfere with its ability to perform music with it? I don't know. And half of that is just going to be dabbling with it, exploring that possibility. And to me, that's like, it's as much fun to be able to dabble and find out what doesn't work as knowing what works. And it's also just as much fun to really get to a point where, like, I might be able to make a piece work, even if I have to, saw on 5 different pieces of wood at different angles, at different points, wet wood versus dry wood, and just find the right sound that I want to use. Like that's a fun experiment, but by the end of it, if I can make an actual piece of music with it, and then share it with friends and family and say, like, here's this piece of music, and they're, that's all right, and go, yeah, I made it with a saw, a hammer, and a bucket of nails, and they're like, you what? Like half that, like, you can do that? It's not like I can do it. It's just like, it's possible to do that. Yeah, you can do that. That's the enjoyment for me out of that. Like, if it were just like, here, use this piano to create this note that, for the last, 8 centuries, people have been producing these exact same notes in this exact same way. Like, that's okay. But I kind of want to see what else I can do. I can always go back to playing a piano at some point if I need to. I can always find a piano somewhere and say, like, okay, now if this were done on a piano, I can do it this way. Like, that's easy to find. It's not as easy, and that's part of the reason why I think I like the stuff that Andrew Hong has done, where he's done the music from a pot, or he built a beat for producing music from the sniff of Donald Trump on a speech. And he's done a couple of other weird ones that were fun to listen to. And like, I really appreciate the idea that, like, when I tinker on a physical project and I go into a hardware store, I look at everything in that hardware store differently than I did before I tinkered on that project. Like, I can't go to a website and find pieces for making a lamp anymore without realizing, like, years ago when I was looking at, I purchased a lamp from a thrift store, and I took it apart for the cord and the socket for the light, and I had all these brass cups left over that were stacked to make the main body of the lamp. And then I proceeded to use those little brass cups around pieces of wood to make brass and wood ray guns for steampunk and ray gun gothic designs. And I can't now ever go back to a website or a store, a thrift store, and not see pieces for making artwork and mad scientist equipment and ray guns and stuff like that on every lamp part that I see now. It's just affected how I see that stuff. And like I walk into a hardware store and I see components that I can use in ways they're not meant to be used, but I could do so much interesting stuff with that. The copper pipes and the pipe ends and the bends and the elbows can be used to make different lamps, or you can use them to make musical instruments. I can cut them down the side, spread them out into flat sheets of metal, and then chemically or salt water etch patterns into them. And like, that's not how they're meant to be used. I can use those pieces of copper pipe actually to electroplate things. And like, those are all things I can think about when I walk into the hardware store now. And like, the possibilities of all the things I can do with everything you've got in here, and most of them are not how you intended those pieces to be used, that's just joy to me. It means that, like, it's also the reason why like empty milk jugs and other scrap plastics are resources for me to play with. I can make whole slews of things that one wouldn't think of, and when they look at the materials I make them out of, they go like, well, that's just garbage. Well, it was just garbage. I can make a lot of things with just garbage. And so I feel like part of the reason I want to do these things the way I'm doing them is because I want to be able to look at sound the same way I look at all the things in the hardware store or garbage. Like, we're surrounded by noises and sounds. Like right now in this room, like if you were in a real room with no other background noises, it would be creepy because there's an odd silence that we're not used to hearing. We're used to being able to filter out and just be aware that, we're in a room. So we expect that room to affect sound in a certain way. And we're unconscious of the impact of a lot of that stuff. And I want to become conscious of it. I want to become aware and not just notice it, but be able to manipulate it to achieve certain effects. And I think the way for me, the best way for me to be able to do that is to start recording and ripping and tearing apart samples for their constituent components. And like the sound of that explosion that I built yesterday, the crinkling in the background of the noise, the realization that the naked sound was too much clipping at the tops and bottoms of the audio spectrum to get a clean sound from, but putting it underneath a blanket and popping it there tore out a lot of that interference at the high end of the spectrum, but it also changed the sounds so they don't get that sharpness that you get from an actual explosion. And so in that sense, like, what is that new sound, that muffled pop sound, good for, and how can I mess with that sample to get another use out of it? I mean, if I take that same sample and if I take the sample of the muffled pop versus the naked pop and give them the same treatment of slowing it down, pitch change, add some wah-wah to it, the result of both of those being tweaked in the same way will be two very, very, very different sounds. And that's just the main difference between putting cloth between the speaker and the pop. like what else affects? Like if I did it in a garage where there are no soft surfaces to absorb the sound, how does that affect it? If I put the recorder inside a tin can, set the tin can up so that the recording area is up here and pop something down here versus popped it over the opening, how does that affect the sound? And with the differences in sound I get from both of those, what is the effect of tweaking those sounds, slowing them down, speeding them up even? If I speed it up, do I get a clicky tone from it? Or like the sharper sound might give you a sharper, snappy sound, whereas the muffled tone may give you more of a crack sound, like a kind of sound, rather than a. So it's like the differences in what I do with those, like I don't know what they're going to do yet, but I kind of want to find out. And part of that is just exploring and experimenting. I feel like if I were to take a plugin or a suite of existing sounds, it removes some of that exploration process for me. I mean, I can still dabble with it because there are some tones that I do want an electronic-y artificial sound to, and I may only really get that by just playing with sliders on an individual feedback tone. And yeah, that'll be fine to experiment with that. But for the vast majority of sounds that I want to play with, I think to get musicality out of them and to get things I can combine together to get sound effects of certain things, I think real world sounds as a place to start from is probably going to do me the most advantage and be the most fun for me, because it's also fun to just say like, okay, so here's a thing, there's a noise, what does it do? What can I do with that noise now? And so just kind of exploring the meaning and the consequence of those actions. And I think that there is an inherent part in my mindset where finding a thing that generally we consider worthless, finding something worthless and tweaking it is more fun for me than finding something that has a neutral or positive value. Like, it's just like that bag is garbage. It has zero value to anybody. It's actually clutter. If it's just empty like that, it's clutter right now to most people. I know I can turn that into a bracelet or a keychain or any number of little objects through some arts and crafts. Now, further into that spectrum, like if I do my trick for shrinking and hardening that up into a little tile, if I put that tile on the edge of a table and strum it to make a tone that I then make a piece of music out of, to me, that's more fun than getting a copy of that tone from any other source. If it produces a sound that's exactly like a guitar string being plucked, I'd rather get it from that than a guitar string. That's just the way my brain works. But yeah, so that's sort of what I'm trying to get to a point where I can do. But learning the LMMS software, I keep tripping over things, and I know I should just ask for directions on it. I should just go look up, like, how is this supposed to work? What am I not doing right here? But I still keep poking at it without looking up that reference yet. It's a quirk of my behavior. It'd be faster if I just go look it up, and I think I'll probably do that tonight or tomorrow. I'm also prepping for game night on Sunday, so I got to get ready for that. And then Sunday also is the first day of the next cycle of week content. I believe that's a video game, that we're going to be working on video game again. And then after that, I think, is my first entry for health and well-being. And then we finish off the month. What's that look like? Where are we at on this? So come on, computer. There we go. So this coming week is video game. Health and well-being is the 26th through the 1st-ish. And then the 2nd through the 8th will be a start of a new month, which I believe is another writing project. Wow, time is moving way faster than I'm ready for. But I do have to start getting ready to go out to California for early July. So I have to head out before the end of June. And I got a lot of things to do before I'm able to do that. And then once I'm out in California, I'm there for VidCon. And I'm debating. I'm really hardly debating. I'm such a Star Wars nerd. And this month, at the end of this month right now, they're opening up the Star Wars land, essentially. It's a whole smaller park devoted entirely to Star Wars stuff. And it's in Disneyland in California. And I'm like, oh man, that would be so fun. I would totally enjoy that. I would probably do an entire series of videos off of that if I really wanted to. But it's going to be new enough that it's going to be hard to get into. I think they will have just finished with reservations. Like, you have to reserve it to get in. And they may have just finished with that. So it'll still be like first come, first serve who can go into that park. And the ticket prices are not cheap. And so I don't want to get a ticket for Disneyland only to find out there's not enough space for me to be allowed to go in there. So, and like my only other option to go is like, I'll have to wait a year. And I'm okay with waiting a year if it makes sense, but like I'm debating whether or not it's like, do I take the chance and try to go in this year? I don't know. I don't think I will this year. I may try next year because it sounds like as soon as they're done with the Star Wars one this year, they're getting started to get ready to do a superhero themed section next year at the same time frame that they were aiming to do Star Wars for this year. So by the end of May, they're hoping to be done. And VidCon next year, maybe the end of June, early July again. And if I can go next year, I will probably easily be able to get into the Star Wars section and be in that frame of possibly get into superhero section. And at that point, I think that's more justifiable financially. I just hate the fact that I'm gonna be in California and I'm just gonna wait a year. I'm not gonna be in California for a year. I'm gonna be in California and then leave California without doing it and wait a year to do it. Oh well, it'll be what it'll be. I'll see what I can do. But yeah, so I'm gonna play around a little bit with the music feature because I've done a lot of the sound effects this week so far. I've got most of that list, the priority ones on that list taken care of. I think I still need to do Broken Glass and like the cash register and the school bell kind of sound. I might be able to even trick out a cop-out approach for the school bell. I think I have a small bell that could do I might even have an alarm clock, like an old wind-up alarm clock with a bell. And if I just change the pitch of that down a little bit, that might work. The steam whistle. Could I do a teapot? Could I get a teapot on the stovetop and get it to whistle? and then drop the tone on it and sharpen it a little bit, maybe I might be able to get that to work. The breaking glass, I'm just going to have to break glass. That's fine. I'll do that. So that's sort of where I am right now. I think it's we're about 56 minutes in. It's always fun talking with you, because like I come on here and I think like, oh well, take a look up after chit chatting for like a minute or two about what I'm working on, and we're in, oh yeah, it's 5 to 7 minutes. I'm like, wow, 5 to 7 minutes. I feel like I'm gonna end early tonight at like 10, 15 minutes, because I can't imagine talking for very much longer. And then here we are at almost an hour now, and I could probably keep rambling, but let's save a little bit for tomorrow, shall we? I'll call it a night here. Thanks for joining me. Feel better, take care of yourself, and have a good night. All right, so I will call it there, I think. Whew.